When Sarah heard her younger sister's laugh echoing from behind the door, the ballroom was filled with the sound of guests clinking their silverware against crystal glasses, waiting for the groom to kiss the bride at the floral arch. She froze near the restrooms. The voices drifted from the slightly ajar door of the service hallway. A sliver of light trembled in the crack. God, she's as naive as a child. 3 years and she never figured out I was your mistress. Chloe laughed softly, but there was so much triumph in that chuckle that Sarah felt as though she were hearing a stranger, not her sister. No scream escaped her lips. Her designer clutch didn't slip from her grasp. Only her fingers moved, instinctively finding her phone. The screen lit up, reflecting against the sleek marble tiles. Sarah pressed record. Behind the wall, Carter replied, "Keep it down. People walk through here." His voice was unrecognizable. Gone was the soft, affectionate tone he had used for his toast half an hour ago, when he promised to protect and cherish Sarah. Now his words dripped with irritation, as if his bride annoyed him even in her absence. "Scared?" Chloe teased. "It's too late for that. We already signed the marriage license. We just have to survive this circus, and then I can finally take what I've been tolerating her sweet little smiles for." Sarah had only stepped out of the reception for a few minutes. The heavy scent of lilies and the blinding camera flashes had made her feel suffocated. Now, the celebration felt a million miles away. "You promised to handle the paperwork right after the ceremony," Chloe hissed. "Don't drag this out. Mom will talk her into it. She'll tell her that a wife needs to trust her husband." "I remember," Carter said. "But Arthur Vance isn't an idiot. He was her daddy's old business partner, not some mall cop. Her mother will apply the pressure, and Sarah will sign. First, the power of attorney, then the voting shares on the board, and finally leveraging the townhouse for our joint venture. You came up with it yourself." Sarah pressed her shoulder against the cold wall. Her mind was entirely blank, save for a few isolated words echoing in her head. Power of attorney. Shares. Townhouse. Mom. "And what if she doesn't sign?" Carter asked behind the door. Chloe scoffed. "She'll sign. She always tries to be the perfect, proper one. Her precious father made her the golden heiress, and Mom made her the guilty older sister who owes me. It's a very convenient combination." A single tear slipped down Sarah's cheek. She wiped it away with the back of her hand. The agonizing pain seemed to step aside, making way for a terrifying, crystal-clear lucidity. Chloe's voice grew bolder. "For 3 years, I've had to listen to you call her tender and special. And then you come to my bed and confess that lying next to her puts you to sleep out of sheer boredom. Stop playing the decent groom. I'm not playing it for fun. You know that. It's for the money." The pause was brief. Then Carter said something that couldn't be written off as a moment of anger. "Her trust fund isn't just going to magically transfer itself to me. I'm not an idiot. But if she brings me into the business, grants me access, and sinks her capital into a joint project, everything changes. I can survive a divorce later. The main thing is not to spook her right now." Sarah looked into the mirror across the hall. The bride staring back at her had become a stranger in a matter of seconds. With every sentence spoken behind that door, her gaze grew calmer. From the ballroom, the DJ's voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, in just a few moments, we invite you to direct your attention to the screens for a beautiful video chronicling Sarah and Carter's love story." The guests erupted in applause. Chloe laughed again. "How sweet. A love story. I hope there's no footage of you sneaking out of my apartment." "Knock it off," Carter snapped. "Pull yourself together. Go run to your sister. Tell her whatever she wants to hear. We can't afford a scene right now. I just want to finish this charade." Sarah let out an almost soundless exhale. The recording was still running, capturing the collapse of the illusion she had carefully guarded for 3 years. "Mom will take my side anyway," Chloe said, her tone softening. "She always chooses me. She pities me because my dad was a deadbeat who drank himself to death, while I had to grow up in the shadow of your rich princess. Don't call Sarah a princess in front of people. In public, I call her my sweet girl. Then keep doing it. And after the divorce, you're marrying me. You promised. First, we need to get what we started all this for. You're my favorite bastard, Carter. Did you think we were in this for the romance? No. It's about fairness. She's always had everything. I only had mom's complaints, and my drunk dad passed out on the couch. Now it's my turn. Sarah was no longer crying. If she threw the door open now, they would start lying, and her mother would recite her usual mantra, "Be the bigger person, Sarah." No, she wouldn't let them hide. When the voices faded, Sarah saved the audio file. She touched up her lipstick with a tissue and smiled. The smile wasn't bridal, but it was honest. A minute later, Chloe emerged from the service corridor. Seeing Sarah, she froze for a fraction of a second, but instantly stretched her lips into a tender, sisterly smile. "Sarah, there you are. Everyone's looking for you. Were you crying from happiness?" Chloe tilted her head, trying to gauge her sister's expression, but Sarah had already walked past her. Carter appeared seconds later. His eyes immediately darted to the phone in Sarah's hand. "Darling, where did you disappear to? Is everything okay?" Sarah looked at him. Her gaze was so unsettlingly calm that he was the first to look away. A lot of things became perfectly clear tonight. He frowned, but a waiter walked past, and the groom decided against asking unnecessary questions. Sarah led the way back into the ballroom. Inside, she was trembling, but outwardly she held herself together for the moment that needed to happen in front of witnesses. The country club ballroom was packed with relatives, college friends, colleagues, and her late father's business partners. Nancy, her mother, was adjusting Chloe's bracelet. Martha Davis, an old family friend, immediately noticed Sarah's face. "What's wrong?" Emily, Sarah's best friend and maid of honor, whispered, "If I flinch, don't let me stop." Emily's smile vanished. The DJ announced the love story video. A title card with their names appeared on the massive screens. Carter reached for Sarah's hand. She carefully slipped her fingers from his grasp and stood up. "Excuse me," Sarah said, taking the microphone from the DJ. "Before the video, I have something else I'd like to share with our guests." A ripple of intrigued murmurs swept through the room. Nancy smiled weakly, while Chloe slowly set her champagne flute on the table. "Dylan, please connect my phone to the sound system. I need to play an audio file. Turn the volume all the way up." The DJ looked confused. "Maybe after the montage?" "Now." Carter stood up. "Sarah, what's going on?" She didn't look at him. "Sit down, please. The guests will find this highly informative." The hall fell dead silent. Dylan plugged in the auxiliary cable. A dark rectangle with a moving audio waveform appeared on the screens. The first sentence echoed through the massive speakers, shockingly loud. "God, she's as naive as a child. 3 years and she never figured out I was your mistress." Absolute, suffocating silence descended instantly. Chloe jumped up, knocking against the table. Nancy opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Carter took a step toward the DJ booth. "Turn that off!" he barked at Dylan. "Don't you dare," Martha Davis said sharply. Arthur Vance, her father's former partner, stood up and physically blocked Carter from the soundboard. "Let the recording play. If it's a lie, you can explain it later." The audio continued. 200 guests listened to the groom and the maid of honor discuss powers of attorney, voting shares, leveraging real estate, a planned divorce, and their future marriage. The words systematically stripped away their masks. Linda Preston, the groom's mother, turned a deep shade of crimson. "This is an outrage! At his own wedding!" she hissed. Chloe rushed to her mother. "Mom, it's a deepfake. She edited it. She's always hated me." Nancy stared at the screen, though there were no faces, only the pulsing white line of the audio wave. Then came the snippet where her youngest daughter said, "Mom will take my side anyway. She always chooses me." Followed by the cruel words about pity, convenience, and blindness, Nancy seemed to age a decade in a single minute. She turned her gaze to her younger daughter. "Chloe, is that you?" "Mom, don't listen to it. She did this on purpose. It's your voice." Chloe fell silent. Carter tried to seize control of the narrative. "Sarah, you are making a massive mistake right now. We can talk about this in private. Everyone's exhausted, people have been drinking, who knows what was said." On the recording, his own voice cut him off. "Her trust fund isn't just going to magically transfer itself to me. I'm not an idiot." Someone in the crowd gasped. Emily covered her mouth with her hand, then quickly lowered it, stepping closer to her best friend. The bride held the microphone with both hands. The truth had to run its course. The recording ended with Chloe's declaration. "Now it's my turn." The audio wave flatlined. For several seconds, no one breathed. Even the DJ was nervously crumpling his cue cards. Linda Preston was the first to snap out of the shock. "This is a private family matter. You had no right to humiliate people in front of high society," Martha scoffed bitterly. The humiliation didn't start on that screen. Robert Preston, Carter's father, stood up, his face dark with fury. "Sarah, do you realize you are destroying my son's life? Your son came for mine. I merely turned up the volume." Nancy sat frozen in her chair. Chloe was sobbing loudly, but her tears were fueled by rage, not remorse. Carter stepped dangerously close to Sarah. "Give me the phone." Emily immediately stepped between them. "Back off. I am talking to my wife." Sarah raised a hand to stop her friend and met Carter's gaze. "You have no right to call me that after what everyone just heard." "I do. We signed the license." He said it quietly. Meant only for her. Those words carried a warning. There was no love, no shame, no plea for forgiveness. His calculation was desperately clinging to its final thread. The legal seal, the documents, the status of a husband. Sarah realized that the evening wasn't ending with an exposure. It was the beginning of a war. She turned to the guests. "I want to thank everyone who came today to share what was supposed to be the most important day of my life. Instead of a celebration, you witnessed the truth. It hurts, but I am profoundly grateful that I heard it before I signed a single document related to my home, my father's company, or my future." Nancy flinched at the mention of the documents. Chloe wiped her face with a napkin and hissed, "You always wanted to drag me through the mud, didn't you?" Sarah didn't even acknowledge her. She took off her diamond ring and set it on the edge of the table, next to an untouched glass of champagne. "Carter, my attorney will contact you tomorrow. I will be filing for an annulment. Not a divorce where you can play the victimized husband and ask for alimony. An annulment. Because you entered into this contract through egregious fraud." Whispers erupted across the ballroom. The word court hadn't been spoken, but everyone knew exactly where this night was heading. Carter smirked, the last traces of the charming groom vanishing entirely. "You think it's that simple? I'm not agreeing to anything. We are legally married. Let's see how you prove your little hysterical theories in a court of law." Emily gripped Sarah's arm tightly. Martha Davis moved toward them, ready to act as a human shield. Arthur Vance was already quietly instructing the club manager to secure the security camera footage. Nancy stood up. Her face was ashen, her lips trembling. "Sarah," the older daughter looked at her mother. In that single look lay years of history, yielding to Chloe's tantrums, stepping aside to accommodate someone else's pity, placing guilt above fairness. "Not now, Mom." Nancy stopped, as if those words had physically slammed a door in her face. Sarah handed the microphone back to the DJ. The tech guy leaned in and whispered, "If you need it, I'll testify that you only gave me the file tonight." "Thank you," she said. Carter caught up to her near the grand mahogany exit doors. "You'll regret this." Sarah turned around. Behind him stood Chloe, stripped of her triumphant smirk. The groom's mother was frantically telling anyone who would listen that the recording was an AI deepfake. His father was aggressively dialing his phone amidst scattered napkins and uneaten filet mignon. "Are you out of your mind?" Sarah replied softly. "Tonight is the first time in years I don't pity myself. Thanks for opening my eyes." She walked out of the country club with Emily. The chilly Boston night air hit her, smelling of rain on hot asphalt. Her heavy Vera Wang gown made it hard to walk, her veil catching on the door of the waiting black SUV. But Sarah didn't ask for help until Emily gently gathered the tool. Before getting in, she looked back at the glowing windows of the ballroom. Inside remained the 5-tier cake, the gifts, the floral arch, the ring, and the people who, just an hour ago, had called her a happy bride. Her phone buzzed. A text from Carter lit up the screen. "Delete the recording, or you'll regret it. I am your husband, Sarah. A judge will hear that too." She read the text, took a screenshot, and forwarded it to Emily. Then she opened the saved audio file, synced it to the cloud, and put her phone in her purse. The SUV pulled away. Looking out the window, Sarah knew exactly what was coming. Tomorrow, Carter would deny everything. Chloe would lie. Her mother would search for words to fix the unfixable. But now, Sarah had the voice of truth, and a resolve she would not abandon. The morning after the wedding began, with the buzzing of a phone on a strange nightstand. Sarah opened her eyes in Emily's guest room, momentarily disoriented by the bookshelf above her, instead of the vaulted ceiling of the penthouse, where Carter had promised to carry her over the threshold. Then, the memory crashed down on her. The service corridor. Chloe's laugh. The recording. The massive screens. The ring beside the champagne glass. The phone vibrated again. Carter's name flashed on the screen, followed by a missed call from her mother, then one from Chloe. Sarah muted the device. Emily walked in holding 2 mugs of black coffee. Don't answer. Right now, they aren't calling to apologize. They're calling to break you. I know. Sarah's voice was raspy. She had spent the night sitting on Emily's kitchen floor in her wedding dress, while Emily sat with her in silence, guarding her friend's fragile composure. Is the file secure? Sarah asked. Locked down. I have a copy. It's in your email, on your cloud, and on a flash drive. I also saved the screenshot of Carter's threat. Sarah picked up her phone. Carter's first texts were brief. Answer me. You ruined everything. Then the tone shifted. Sarah, I love you. Let's talk. Then came the threats. I am your legal husband. I will sue for defamation. The last one came at 3 a.m. Delete everything before it's too late. I won't let you erase our marriage this easily. She took another screenshot. Her fingers were steady. He doesn't want to let go, Emily observed quietly. He doesn't want me. He wants the status. During the sleepless hours, a terrifying realization had crystallized. Carter wasn't going to repent. He was going to cling to the marriage certificate, to the word husband, to the legal right to stand next to her and speak for her assets. If she just filed for a standard divorce, he would petition the court for a mandatory reconciliation period, play the role of the heartbroken man, and use the time to pressure her through her mother, their social circle, and her business partners. Emily had already contacted Jessica Hayes, a sharp, ruthless corporate and family attorney whom Sarah's late father had always trusted. Jessica listened to the brief summary over the phone, scheduled an emergency meeting for 10 a.m., and gave immediate instructions. Bring the original recording, copies of the texts, the marriage license, your ID, and all documents pertaining to your trust in real estate, Jessica had ordered. Do not send anything to anyone yet. Do not engage in arguments. Anything you text back will be used to paint you as the aggressive party. Carter texted that the recording is illegal in this state, Sarah had mentioned. Let him type whatever he wants. We'll handle it in the office. The golden rule, delete nothing, and agree to 0 in-person meetings without a witness. Half an hour later, the doorbell rang. It was Nancy. Emily opened the door and instantly tensed. Sarah's mother stood in the hallway in a dark trench coat, wearing no makeup, clutching a tote bag of Sarah's casual clothes. I need to speak to Sarah, Nancy said. It's her choice. Sarah stepped into the foyer. Come in, Mom. Nancy crossed the threshold. Her eyes lingered on the discarded wedding dress draped over an armchair. Sweetie, Chloe said some terrible things. Carter is to blame too. But the fact is, you signed the papers. You're married. You can take a pause, talk it out calmly, away from the public eye. Away from the public eye was where they had been lying to her for 3 years. Nancy grimaced. Chloe was in despair. You know how her life has been. Her father broke her spirit, abandoned us, and drank himself to death. She always felt inadequate next to you. And that's why she ended up sleeping with your fiancé. Nancy lowered her head. I'm not making excuses. You are making excuses. You're just using different words. Nancy gripped the straps of her tote bag. Carter came by the house last night. He said he loves you. He said Chloe twisted everything. That yes, they had an affair, but he was going to end it after the wedding. Sarah picked up her phone and hit play midway through the audio file. The guest room filled with Chloe's voice. Mom will talk her into it. She'll tell her that a wife needs to trust her husband. Then Carter. The main thing is not to spook her right now. Then her sister again. Mom will take my side anyway. She always chooses me. Nancy turned pale. Is that? Did you edit those parts? Sarah asked coldly. Her mother sank into a dining chair. The tote bag dropped to the floor. I didn't know she thought that. You didn't want to know. They sat in silence for a few seconds. Then Nancy asked, stripped of her previous parental authority, what are you going to do? I'm filing for an annulment based on fraud. It's not just a divorce. I want it on public record that he is a con artist. It's going to be a trial. Carter won't agree to it. He'll fight it. On paper, he is your husband. Sarah gave a barely perceptible smirk, which is exactly why I can't afford to wait. Nancy looked at her oldest daughter with deep anxiety, though it seemed rooted more in fear of scandal than empathy. Chloe won't survive this if you drag it out to the bitter end. And I was supposed to survive it all in silence? Her mother had no answer. She left the bag of clothes by the door and said quietly, I don't know how to navigate this anymore. Start by not repeating other people's lies. Nancy left. The door clicked shut softly. But to Sarah, Emily's apartment instantly felt larger and easier to breathe in. By noon, Sarah and Emily were sitting in Jessica Hayes' corner office in a downtown high-rise. The lawyer greeted Sarah without an ounce of pity, which immediately helped steady her nerves. Walk me through it sequentially. From the moment you left the ballroom, Jessica said. Sarah spoke for a long time. Emily chimed in regarding the backups, the witness texts, and the timeline. Then they played the recording in full. The attorney didn't interrupt once. When the audio ended, Jessica took off her reading glasses and set them on a legal pad. Here is the critical reality. Infidelity, even on the wedding day, does not automatically render a marriage voidable in this state. Judges don't grant annulments just for broken hearts. I understand, but they aren't just talking about an affair. They're discussing the core purpose of the marriage, manipulating my assets, coercing me through my mother, accessing my father's holding company. Exactly, Jessica nodded. We need to prove that Carter entered the union with zero intent to fulfill the marital contract, and that the marriage was strictly a vehicle to defraud you. Is that a high bar? Yes, but it's possible, especially if we can establish a pattern of premeditation prior to the ceremony. Jessica outlined the requirements. Text records regarding legal documents, drafts of powers of attorney, security footage from the club, and testimonies from anyone Carter grilled about her corporate shares or bank accounts. Sarah remembered an evening a week before the wedding. Carter had been sitting at her kitchen island with his MacBook, claiming that as her husband, he wanted to take some of the administrative burden off her shoulders. He had offered to be added as a signatory to her accounts. At the time, it had sounded like an act of devotion. I have emails, Sarah said. He sent me a checklist of legal housekeeping. He kept texting, Babe, trust me, a husband needs to help protect your assets. He attached a file titled POA, Draft, Standard. I didn't even open it. I told him we'd look at it after the honeymoon. Jessica printed the first page of the draft from Sarah's forwarded email. As she read, her jaw tightened. These are incredibly broad powers. Way too broad for someone who merely wants to help pay the utility bills. He was trying to get carte blanche over your trust. Sarah smiled for the first time that morning. Jessica formulated a battle plan. Step 1. Issue a formal cease and desist and corporate notification to all partners at Sterling Enterprises that Carter Preston held zero legal authority, proxy, or representative power regarding Sarah or the estate of Richard Sterling. Step 2. Subpoena the country club to preserve all CCTV footage. Step 3. Secure sworn affidavits from the DJ, Dylan, and the club manager, Andrew Miller, regarding the timeline of the audio playback. Then we file the petition, Jessica said. He is going to drag this out. Almost certainly. First, he'll claim he loves you. Then he'll file for a court-mandated reconciliation period. Then he'll try to get the audio thrown out as illegal wiretapping, play on your emotions, and paint himself as the victim of a hysterical bride. He already started. Sarah showed her the 3 a.m. text. Save everything, the lawyer instructed. Sometimes arrogance makes my job infinitely easier than a confession. Leaving the high-rise, Sarah held a thick legal folder. Emily offered to drive her home, but Sarah shook her head. The office first. Are you sure? If you go there, he might show up. If I hide, he wins the narrative. Sterling Enterprises occupied 2 floors of a sleek glass building overlooking the harbor. The reception area was uncomfortably quiet as she walked in. The whispers had clearly arrived before she did. Sarah walked straight into the boardroom and asked her assistant to find Arthur Vance. Arthur walked in 10 minutes later. "Martha sent me the recording last night," he said without preamble. "Ugly business, but thank God she sent it." "Did Carter ask you about the company before the wedding?" Arthur paused, sitting down heavily. "Yes, several times. He kept probing about your exact equity percentage, who had signing authority on the escrow accounts, and the bylaws regarding replacing the board of directors. I gave him the runaround. I need you to put that in a sworn affidavit for my lawyer. Done. And there's something else. Yesterday morning, the day of the wedding, he called accounting. Asked them to send over a comprehensive list of liquid assets, claiming it was for your new joint family financial planning." Sarah slowly lowered her folder onto the mahogany table. "Did they send it?" "Absolutely not. I instituted a hard freeze on all financial disclosures months ago, unless it had your physical signature. I actually drafted a memo regarding it. I was waiting for you to get back from the honeymoon to authorize it. Send it out right now. Carter Preston has no affiliation with this company, cannot access data, sign contracts, or negotiate on my behalf." By mid-afternoon, the counteroffensive was in full swing. Jessica Hayes's office served the country club. Andrew Miller replied promptly. The security footage was locked in the safe, and he would testify to seeing Carter and Chloe creeping out of the service corridor. Dylan the DJ texted Emily, saying Carter's mother had already called him, demanding he sign a statement saying Sarah had the audio file prepared weeks in advance. He had hung up on her. Around 5 p.m., Carter showed up in the lobby of Sterling Enterprises. Security called up to the executive suite, stating that Mr. Preston was demanding to see his wife. Sarah ordered security not to let him pass the turnstiles. A minute later, her cell phone rang. She hit the record button on her screen recording app and answered. "Speaking. Come down here. We need to talk. Communicate through my attorney. Stop making a scene. You are my wife. You keep repeating that because it's the only leverage you have left. You can run to all the high-priced corporate lawyers you want, Sarah, but a marriage isn't dissolved in 24 hours. He let out a dark, short laugh. "So gear up for months of this. I am not letting you annul anything. I'm not letting you paint me as a gold-digging criminal. I'll petition for marital counseling. I'll demand forensic audits of the audio. I'll subpoena your friends. By the time I'm done, you'll be begging me for a quiet, amicable divorce settlement." Sarah looked through the glass walls of the boardroom. Outside stood Emily and Arthur Vance. Neither of them spoke, but their mere presence was enough to keep her from falling back into the abyss of panic. "If you didn't love me, Carter, why fight so hard to stay married?" "Who said I didn't love you? That recording? You took a stressful argument out of context. I'll tell a judge a very different story." "Are you sure about that?" "I'm sure that you are exhausted. And you'll be even more exhausted when your mother begs you to stop dragging her name through the mud, and when your board members get spooked by the PR nightmare. If you want World War III, you've got it. And remember, as long as I am legally your husband, I have a right to ask questions about our marital assets." Sarah ended the call and instantly forwarded the screen recording to Jessica. Arthur walked into the room. That sounded like a threat. It was a confession of his legal strategy. He explicitly mentioned dragging it out for months. Emily wrapped her arms around Sarah's shoulders. Sarah didn't cry. The conversation hadn't broken her. It had galvanized her. Carter had just confirmed he wasn't going away quietly, which meant there would be no mercy. Late that night, back at Emily's apartment, the dining table was covered in printouts, a flash drive, her passport, the marriage certificate, and Jessica's legal strategy folder. It looked less like the aftermath of a wedding and more like a war room. Her mother hadn't called back. Chloe had sent exactly one text. "You destroyed our family." Sarah stared at the words for a long time, then took a screenshot and added it to the pile. Right before bed, an email arrived from Jessica Hayes. The subject line read, "Draft petition. Annulment." Sarah read the opening lines. There was no mention of the heartbreak, the ruined dress, her mother's betrayal, or the humiliation. It was clinical. Dates, facts, statutory codes, evidence of fraud. Yet, ironically, it was the cold, dry language of the law that finally gave her a solid foundation to stand on. At the bottom of the email, Jessica had added a brief note. Carter's attorney contacted my office, stated his client refuses to dissolve the marriage and formally requested a private sit-down without counsel. I declined. We file tomorrow morning. Sarah closed her laptop. The battlefield was set. Carter was determined not to repent, but to hold on to her like a piece of real estate he hadn't fully squeezed the equity out of yet. 3 days after the wedding, Sarah saw her name in a forwarded screenshot and realized Carter was fighting a two-front war, one in the legal system and one in the court of public opinion. Emily sent the image. In a massive WhatsApp group chat containing mostly Carter's extended family and friends, his mother, Linda, had posted, "Just so everyone knows the truth. The bride had a psychotic break over unfounded jealousy. She orchestrated a public humiliation of the Preston family and is now trying to mask her cruelty as exposing the truth." Someone in the chat asked about the recording. Linda replied, "With AI and deepfakes these days, anyone can fake a voice. She planned it to destroy my son." Sarah read it without the burning flush of shame she would have felt a week ago. Since Carter's threatening phone call, a heavy steel door had shut inside her. The shock was locked behind it. Only the work remained. "Don't reply," Emily said over the phone. "Let Jessica see how they're digging their own graves." "I'm not saying a word." "Good, because I would have gone scorched earth by now. That's why I'm your best friend." At the Sterling Enterprises office, a framed notice now hung by the elevators. Carter Preston is not an authorized representative of Sarah Sterling or any affiliated entities. Arthur Vance walked into Sarah's office without knocking, holding a stack of accounting logs. "A man tried to socially engineer one of our junior payroll clerks last night over the phone. Wanted to know who approves wire transfers. Description matches Robert Preston, Carter's father." Sarah took the log. "He probably introduced himself as a family friend, said his son is now the owner's husband, so he'd find out anyway. They genuinely believe a piece of paper from City Hall overrides federal fraud laws. They're banking on you suffering from battle fatigue." Sarah slipped the log into Jessica's expanding folder. "They're going to be waiting a long time." By noon, Martha Davis forwarded a text from Chloe. Her younger sister had written, "Tell Sarah that if this goes to open court, Mom's heart won't be able to take the stress. Tell her to stop pretending she cares about family." Sarah showed the phone to Emily. "She's using Mom as a human shield. She's been doing that her whole life," Emily replied. "Only difference is, Mom used to volunteer for the job." That evening, Sarah drove to her mother's house. She needed to retrieve her late father's personal archives, copies of deeds, old letters, and notarized documents regarding the Sterling estate. Chloe answered the door. She wore no makeup and an oversized hoodie, but she didn't look broken. She looked venomous. "Come to finish the job? Here for your precious paperwork? It's always about the money with you, isn't it?" "Yes. Even now." Sarah stepped into the foyer, forcing Chloe to step back. From the kitchen, Nancy's voice called out, "Chloe, who is it? Your sister?" Nancy appeared and froze in the hallway, standing perfectly between her two daughters, as if the floorboards were a demilitarized zone. "Sarah, I boxed up Richard's files. They're in the den. Thank you." Chloe latched the chain on the door, even though Sarah was already inside. "Afraid I'll run away?" Sarah asked. "Afraid you'll stage another dramatic performance," Chloe sneered. "You're so damn proud of that little recording. Acting like you caught a serial killer. I caught 2 parasites trying to bleed a marriage dry. You caught a man who couldn't stand the sight of you. There's a difference." Nancy flinched. "Chloe, please. Stop." "Why stop?" Let her hear it without a microphone. Carter suffocated around her. "He didn't come to my bed for money. He came to me to feel alive." Sarah looked at her sister with clinical detachment. Beneath Chloe's defiance, there was something much darker than mere sibling rivalry. It was an ancient, festering resentment that no longer needed a disguise. "Then why were you two strategizing about my voting shares and powers of attorney?" "Because you hold everything hostage. Even when you don't deserve it, you always hold the winning hand." "My hand? Or my father's?" "Mine." Nancy gripped the back of a dining chair. "Chloe." "No, Mom, let her hear it." She had the rich dad, the Ivy League tuition, the penthouse, the pristine reputation. I had a deadbeat who pawned your jewelry and passed out in his own vomit on the porch. You cried every night, Mom, And the next morning you'd tell Sarah she had to share. She had to yield. Because her life was easier. So you decided to balance the cosmic scales by hijacking my wedding? Sarah asked. I decided to take what was owed to me. It doesn't belong to you just because your feelings got hurt. Chloe took a step closer. You sound just like your pompous father. Everything has to be by the rules. Everything has to look perfect. That's why you let me lie to your face for 3 years. You were so desperate for a handsome man to call you a good girl that you refused to see what was right in front of you. Sarah no longer searched her sister's face for any remnant of a bond. You don't love Carter. You just love the idea of defeating me. He was nothing but a trophy to prove you could strip me of something I cared about. Chloe raised her hand to slap her, but Nancy lunged forward and intercepted her wrist. Don't you dare. Chloe yanked her arm free. Oh, so now you're taking her side? Nancy looked utterly depleted. But for the first time, she didn't avert her eyes. I'm taking the side of the truth. It's a little late for that. You already made your bed, Mom. Don't pretend you suddenly found a moral compass just because you're embarrassed in front of your country club friends. Sarah walked into the den, retrieved the 2 heavy bankers' boxes of files, and returned to the hallway. Her mother trailed behind her. Sarah, wait. I have a meeting with my own lawyer tomorrow. I don't know how to fix this. Don't try to fix it right now. Just stay out of my way. Nancy nodded. But Chloe laughed. Of course. The Queen has granted us permission to breathe. Sarah paused at the door. Chloe, if you send one more threatening text to Emily, Martha, or my employees, I will hand it straight to Jessica Hayes and have you slapped with a restraining order. I am done protecting your fragile ego. Do I make myself clear? You think you're so righteous. You're just greedy. Sarah walked out without slamming the door. Once she reached the driveway, her hands finally began to shake. She held the boxes tightly to her chest, listening to the muffled sounds of Chloe screaming at their mother from inside the house. The next morning, Jessica officially filed the petition for annulment. Carter was served, and within 24 hours, his attorney filed a response. The document was written in dry legalese, but behind every paragraph, Sarah could feel the same arrogant smirk Carter wore when he whispered, "We signed the license." He vehemently denied any fraudulent intent. He claimed he entered the marriage out of profound love. He categorized the audio recording as an illegal, out-of-context snippet of an emotional breakdown provoked by Chloe. He explicitly requested the judge mandate a period of marital counseling, arguing that a valid family unit had been formed but was suffering a temporary crisis, exacerbated by interfering third parties. Sarah read the brief in Jessica's office. Every sentence felt like a psychological assault, an attempt to gaslight her reality out of existence. Even after the recording, he has the audacity to use the word family, Sarah said. It's a legal tactic, Jessica replied calmly. He has to present himself as the devoted spouse desperately trying to salvage the union. That automatically frames you as the erratic, unforgiving one. But he literally stated his motive was my assets, which is why we aren't going to rely on emotions. We are going to rely on a documented timeline of premeditation. The drafted POA, the inquiries to accounting, his interrogation of Arthur Vance, the threatening texts, his ambush in the lobby. Jessica slid another piece of paper across the desk. And then there's this. Sarah read it. Carter had filed a motion of discovery, demanding a comprehensive audit of all properties, stocks, and assets acquired by Sarah prior to and following the wedding date, citing that as her legal spouse, he had a vested interest in the fiscal health of the marital estate. He's still digging for the gold, Sarah whispered. Exactly. And the judge will see that even in the middle of fighting for his broken heart, his primary concern is getting a look at your portfolio. As they walked out of Jessica's suite toward the elevators, Sarah practically ran into Carter. He had arrived unannounced, wearing a tailored navy suit and holding a massive bouquet of white roses. The receptionist was trying to block him, explaining that meetings were strictly by appointment, but he had already spotted Sarah. Sarah. Wait. Jessica immediately stepped in front of her client. Mr. Preston, all communications go through my firm. Carter held up the roses, clearly playing to the invisible cameras in his mind, ensuring the receptionist and passing paralegals saw him. I came to see my wife. That's not a crime. I will not speak to you without my attorney present, Sarah said flatly. Right. We communicate through billing hours now. Why did you come here? To apologize. To tell you I'm ready to move past what you did. What I did? You humiliated me in front of Boston's elite. Chloe manipulated me. I panicked. I said stupid things, but I'm willing to forgive you. And the power of attorney? Sarah asked, her voice lethal. He gripped the bouquet tighter. I was trying to be supportive. Same with the bank accounts. You don't understand corporate management as well as you think you do. That single sentence was a better confession than the audio file. Jessica pulled out her legal pad and jotted down the time. Mr. Preston, this interaction is over. If you continue to harass my client, I will seek an immediate injunction. He leaned closer to Sarah, ignoring the lawyer. The judge is going to see a hysterical bride who bolted at the first sign of conflict, and a husband willing to endure public humiliation to save his marriage. I will be at every single hearing. I will file motion after motion. I will demand depositions. You're going to break before I do. Thank you, Sarah said. He frowned. For what? For proving me right. She walked past him. The extravagant bouquet of roses remained in his hands, looking utterly absurd. Following the lobby ambush, Jessica aggressively escalated their position. She filed an affidavit regarding Carter's intimidation tactics at her office. Dylan the DJ signed a sworn statement verifying he received the audio file directly from the bride mid-reception and witnessed her emotional state. Andrew Miller handed over the CCTV footage, which clearly showed Carter and Chloe exiting the restricted service area minutes before Sarah returned to the ballroom. Arthur Vance submitted a devastating affidavit detailing Carter's relentless probing into corporate governance, financial flow, and proxy voting rights. The accounting department provided the logged phone call where he attempted to extract the list of escrow accounts. The net was tightening. But that evening brought a terrifying complication. Nancy called Sarah. It was the first time she had initiated contact since Sarah took the boxes. Sarah, I had to call. Her mother's voice was hoarse with panic. What happened? Chloe left the house. She left a note saying I betrayed her. Carter isn't answering his phone. Sarah closed her eyes, pinching the bridge of her nose. Is she with him? I don't know. I finally got a hold of him, and he told me he wasn't responsible for babysitting a grown woman. In that cold response, Sarah heard the definitive end of their alliance. The moment their scheme collapsed, Chloe went from being Carter's co-conspirator to dead weight. Mom, I'm not going to form a search party for her. I know. I understand. It's just, I spent my entire life thinking I was protecting the weaker child, and I ended up raising someone who refuses to take responsibility for anything. Sarah said nothing. It was the first time her mother had ever voiced that truth out loud. I found Richard's old letters, Nancy continued, her voice breaking. He wrote to you constantly after the divorce. But I didn't give them all to you. Sarah sat up straight. Why? Because I was grieving him? Because it felt like he was buying your loyalty. Some of the envelopes have been in my attic for 15 years. I need to give them to you. Letters from the father who shaped her worldview, hoarded by a mother feeding her own insecurities. Another truth buried for the sake of avoiding conflict. Bring them to Jessica Hayes' office tomorrow, Sarah said. Not to my house. I'm staying at Emily's. You don't trust me. No. Nancy didn't argue. Okay. I'll bring them. 10 minutes later, Emily texted, Did you see this? Attached was a screenshot of Chloe's Instagram story. It read, My sister stripped me of everything I had, and now she's trying to destroy a man who only tried to love her. The real truth is coming out soon. In the comments, Sarah saw a verified reply from Carter. He wasn't defending his mistress, nor was he denying the affair. He left a single calculated sentence. I kindly ask to be kept out of this family drama. I remain fully committed to saving my marriage with my wife. Chloe had outlived her usefulness. Carter was publicly discarding her to maintain his facade for the judge. He was willing to throw his accomplice under the bus if it meant keeping a grip on Sarah's assets. Early the next morning, Jessica called. We got a date. Preliminary hearing is set. But there's a wrinkle. Carter filed a motion to suppress the audio recording and requested a forensic tech evaluate your phone. He also submitted a sworn declaration claiming that prior to the wedding, you specifically asked him to take over the family finances. I never said that. which means he's either fabricating emails or he bought a witness. Sarah walked over to Emily's dining table. On top of her legal pile sat the marriage certificate. The thick, embossed paper looked so fragile, yet Carter was wielding it like a weapon of mass destruction. Just then, an email notification popped up on Sarah's laptop. The sender was a heavily encrypted Proton mail address. The body of the email contained one sentence: "Look at what your husband was planning a month before the wedding." There was an Excel file attached. Sarah didn't open it. Following protocol, she forwarded it to Jessica, called Emily to come into the room, and only then looked back at the screen. The attachment was titled, "Post, Wedding Timeline, XLSX." She didn't open the actual file until she was sitting in Jessica's office. The lawyer refused to let her click it on her personal device. First, Jessica ran it through a sandbox environment on an isolated computer, saved the metadata, and printed the routing headers. Emily sat beside Sarah, staring at the monitor as if a ghost was about to jump out of it. The spreadsheet was deceptively simple. Columns for dates, bullet points, names, and status updates. But every single cell reeked of predatory calculation. Week 1. Secure General POA. Mom, use the trust angle. Week 2. Chloe, maintain radio silence until papers signed. Week 3. Arthur Vance, placate him. Bypass him later if he blocks board access. Month 3. Townhouse equity loan. Get appraisal via dad's contacts. Year 1. Prep for amicable divorce. Alimony leverage. Sarah read it line by line. The visceral panic that had choked her on her wedding night was gone. It had been replaced by a dense, freezing anger. "He itemized us like we were corporate acquisitions," she said. Jessica slid the printed spreadsheet into a plastic sleeve. "This is explosive, but it's not strictly evidence yet. We need to verify the IP address, metadata author, and definitively tie it to Carter's devices. If we present a rogue spreadsheet from an anonymous email in court, opposing counsel will shred it as a fabrication." "Chloe sent it," Emily said quietly. Sarah looked up. "Which is why we wait," Jessica concluded. "We already have the recording, the POA draft, the aggressive texts, the club footage, Arthur Vance's affidavit, and the accounting logs. This spreadsheet is our nuclear option if we can authenticate it." That afternoon, Nancy arrived at the law firm with a wrapped bundle of Richard Sterling's letters. She didn't ask to go back to the conference room, standing awkwardly in the reception area. "I kept these from you when you were a teenager," Nancy said when Sarah walked out to meet her. "I thought he was trying to buy your affection from the grave." Sarah took the bundle, heavy with history, but didn't untie the twine. "I didn't ask you here to litigate the past, Mom. I need to know where you stand today." Nancy nodded, her eyes rimmed with red. "I'm willing to testify under oath about my conversation with Carter. He came to me and explicitly coached me on how to pressure you into signing over your financial rights. I thought it was just old-fashioned marital restructuring. I was wrong. You realize Chloe will see that as the ultimate betrayal? She already does." Nancy spoke without her usual defensive posture. Her face was etched with profound shame, but Sarah didn't yet know how to accept it as genuine repentance. The first hearing took place a week later at the family court downtown. Sarah arrived flanked by Jessica and Emily, though Emily had to wait in the corridor. Carter was already standing by the tall windows. He wore a conservative charcoal suit, holding a leather folio. His face was a masterpiece of solemn, wounded dignity. Beside him stood his attorney, a sharp-featured woman wearing a silk blouse and a gold chain. Linda and Robert Preston sat on the benches nearby. Chloe was nowhere to be seen. Carter took a step toward Sarah. "It's not too late to stop this circus. Have your lawyer talk to mine. I only want to talk to my wife." "You don't have a wife." He offered a patronizing, tight smile. "The Commonwealth of Massachusetts disagrees." Jessica stepped between them. "Mr. Preston, direct your comments to me." "Wonderful," he sneered. "Let the judge see exactly who is obstructing a reconciliation." The bailiff called them into the courtroom. The judge, an older, no-nonsense woman, verified their appearances, outlined the petition for annulment based on fraud, and sternly warned both tables against turning her courtroom into a reality television reunion. Jessica immediately moved to admit the evidentiary exhibits: the audio file, the text messages, the POA draft, the club CCTV, and the sworn affidavits from Dylan, Andrew Miller, Arthur Vance, and the accounting department. Carter's attorney objected to almost everything. The audio was obtained without two-party consent, a gray area depending on the expectation of privacy in a service hallway. The texts were written under extreme emotional duress. The POA draft was standard marital estate planning. The video lacked audio context. Then Carter stood up. "Your Honor, I am not giving up on my marriage. I love Sarah deeply. I respectfully request the court grant us a mandatory period of reconciliation. My wife is acting under the severe, undue influence of her friends and corporate advisors." Sarah felt a surge of bile. He was speaking of love with the exact same cadence he had used to demand she delete the recording at 3 a.m. Jessica countered smoothly. "Your Honor, the petitioner is not seeking a divorce, but an annulment based on fraudulent inducement. The respondent entered the marriage with the explicit, documented intent to exploit the petitioner's financial assets, possessing no intent to fulfill the marital covenant. A reconciliation period is merely a stalling tactic to allow the respondent continued legal access to the petitioner's estate." The judge denied the immediate request for a reconciliation period, but to Carter's visible smugness, ordered an independent forensic evaluation of the audio file to rule out tampering. Carter had secured his first delay. As they left the courtroom, he leaned in as Sarah passed the oak tables. "I told you. It's a marathon, not a sprint. As long as I'm your husband, you have to deal with me." She didn't flinch. Jessica aggressively noted the interaction. Over the next week, Carter's lawyer buried them in paper. They subpoenaed half the wedding guest list. They demanded a secondary review of the country club footage. They filed aggressive motions to unseal Sarah's premarital trust documents. Every single filing referred to Carter as a devoted spouse fighting to save his family. "He's clinging to the vocabulary," Emily noted one night as they reviewed documents. "Like calling it a family makes him an honest man." "It's a war of attrition," Jessica explained over speakerphone. "The longer he holds the legal title of husband, the more pressure he exerts on your mother, your board of directors, and the press. He wants you to settle." A month passed. The forensic expert's report came back. The audio file was authentic. No deepfakes, no spliced audio, zero signs of tampering. The voices were a 100% match. For Sarah, that piece of paper was the first nail in the coffin of his defense. During the second hearing, Carter pivoted his strategy. He abandoned the devoted husband act and leaned into the victim of circumstance. He claimed the hallway conversation was an explosive argument where Chloe had backed him into a corner, and he was just saying whatever it took to pacify her so he could return to his bride. Jessica cross-examined him with surgical precision. "Mr. Preston, if this was merely pacifying a jealous ex, why did you demand my client delete the recording immediately following the wedding? It was embarrassing to my family. Why did you text her? I am your husband. The court will hear that too? Because it is a legal fact. Why did you attempt to requisition the company's escrow account balances the morning of your wedding? A husband has a fiduciary duty to understand the family's financial standing." By the end of his testimony, Carter was rigid and silent. The judge took meticulous notes. Dylan testified next. Despite his nervousness, he was resolute. The bride handed him the phone directly. He plugged it in. There was no time for Hollywood-level audio manipulation. Andrew Miller testified to the CCTV footage, placing Carter and Chloe together in the corridor at the exact time of the recording. Arthur Vance took the stand and systematically dismantled the caring husband narrative. He detailed Carter's aggressive inquiries into corporate bylaws. Carter's attorney tried to spin it. "Isn't it normal for a new husband to want to ease his wife's administrative burdens? Men who want to help ask about workloads," Arthur replied dryly. "Men who want to steal ask about voting shares." A hush fell over the gallery. After a recess, Nancy was called to the stand. Sarah dreaded this more than Carter's lies. Her mother had a lifelong habit of retreating into self-victimization or protecting Chloe at all costs. But Nancy stood at the podium, gripping the edges, and spoke clearly. "A week before the wedding, Carter Preston came to my home. He told me Sarah was too paranoid to trust him with the estate, and that it was my job as her mother to convince her to hand over power of attorney. I thought he was trying to build a modern marriage. I realize now I was being groomed as an accessory to extortion." Carter's lawyer went on the offensive. "Mrs. Sterling, aren't you simply testifying against your son-in-law to get back into your wealthy daughter's good graces after a family falling out?" Nancy went pale. but her voice didn't waver. I spent my life making excuses for my youngest daughter. I am not making excuses today. I am done lying. Sarah looked down at her hands. It didn't erase decades of favoritism, but for the first time, her mother had refused to hide behind Chloe's trauma. When the hearing adjourned, Carter caused a scene on the courthouse steps. He pulled out his phone, recording himself as he walked toward Sarah. I came here to fight for my wife, and I am being stripped of my family by a cabal of corporate lawyers. Sarah stopped, staring dead into the camera lens. You conspired with my sister to defraud me of my father's estate. The court has the receipts. Post that. He instantly dropped the phone. You think you've won? I think you are terrified of the discovery process. That evening, Sarah's phone rang. It was Chloe. Are you happy? Chloe spat. Mom testified against me. Mom testified to the facts. You always knew how to steal people away. I haven't stolen anyone. Carter acts like I don't exist anymore. Chloe's voice trembled with raw, unhinged fury. He posts online that he wants to save his marriage with you. He's trying to save his bank account, Sarah said. No, he'd sell anyone out to save his own skin. He'd sell you out. And I have the proof. Sarah sat down on the edge of the bed. What proof? His texts. His voice notes. The game plan. The POA strategies. The condo appraisal. The timeline of how to drag the annulment out until you run out of energy and settle for a divorce payout. Chloe let out a bitter, jagged laugh. Tell Jessica Hayes to check her inbox. You're doing this to get back at him, not to help me. What does it matter if it destroys him? It matters in a court of law. I need the raw files, Chloe. Chloe went silent. I'll bring them tomorrow. Don't think this makes us sisters again. I don't. The line went dead. Sarah immediately called Jessica, who warned against meeting Chloe alone and instructed her to do the handoff at the law firm. But the next morning, Chloe never showed up. Her phone went straight to voicemail. By noon, Nancy called in a panic. Chloe is gone. She didn't come home last night. Carter called me from 3 different numbers, demanding to know where she was. I heard her screaming at him over the phone yesterday that she was going to court. Sarah stood up. Have you checked with her friends? No one has seen her. Sarah, I'm scared. Jessica took the phone from Sarah. She extracted a timeline, possible locations, and instructed Nancy to file a missing persons report with the Boston PD immediately. Technically, Chloe was an adult who could disappear on her own, but given the ongoing litigation and the threat to a key witness, it elevated the stakes. An hour later, Carter's attorney filed an emergency motion to delay the next hearing due to a medical emergency. Attached was a vague note from a boutique concierge clinic. Concurrently, they filed a bizarre affidavit claiming Chloe had been extorting Carter for money and threatening perjury. Jessica read it aloud. He is salting the earth. If she shows up, he paints her as a blackmailer. If she stays missing, he plays the innocent victim. Sarah stared at the signature at the bottom of the affidavit. The same hand that had written, "To my beautiful bride" on a card was now systematically trying to erase anyone who stood in his way. He won't stop, Sarah said. Which is why we crush him. That night, Sarah finally untied the bundle of her father's letters. Richard's handwriting was bold and slanted. She opened the top envelope, the paper yellowing at the edges. Maddie, he had written, using her childhood nickname, if a man ever demands your blind trust as a test of his love, do not hand him the keys to your life. Love is never afraid of boundaries. Greed is always in a hurry. She held the letter in her lap as the city lights flickered outside Emily's window. Her phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. If you want to see Chloe alive and out of a psych ward, drop the lawsuit. You don't get to destroy a man's life without consequences. Sarah read the text once, screenshotted it, and sent it to Jessica. The lawyer's reply was instant. Do not leave the apartment. I am coming to you. This just crossed from civil court into a felony. Jessica arrived 40 minutes later. For the first time, Sarah saw the unflappable attorney look genuinely angry. Nancy was already sitting at Emily's kitchen island, clutching her phone to her chest. She had rushed over because she couldn't bear being alone in her empty house. Show me the exact message, Jessica demanded. Sarah handed over her phone. If you want to see Chloe alive and out of a psych ward, drop the lawsuit. You don't get to destroy a man's life without consequences. Nancy gasped. covering her mouth. That's Carter. We aren't going to guess. We are going to establish a paper trail, Jessica said sharply. She photographed the screen, logged the timestamp, and had Emily back it up. Then she dialed a contact at the precinct, explaining that a material witness in a high-stakes civil fraud case was missing, and the plaintiff was receiving extortion texts. This is my fault, Nancy wept. I let him into this family. The only person at fault is the man sending the threats, Jessica snapped. Save the guilt for therapy. We have work to do. By midnight, the police tracked Chloe's last known cell tower pinged to a cheap motel off Interstate 95. Nancy and Emily drove out with the detectives. Sarah stayed behind with Jessica. An hour later, Emily initiated a FaceTime call. We found her, Emily said, turning the camera. Chloe was sitting on a motel bed, wrapped in a cheap blanket. A dark, ugly bruise shaped like fingers wrapped around her left wrist. Nancy hovered over her, looking terrified. What happened? Sarah asked through the screen. Chloe refused to look at the camera. Carter was waiting by my car yesterday. He told me I was mentally unstable and said if I brought the text to your lawyer, his dad had a doctor friend who would have me involuntarily committed for a breakdown. His dad pulled up in an SUV. They tried to force me in so I could sleep it off until the trial was over. I managed to run into a gas station and hid in the bathroom. I dropped my phone. It shattered. Who sent the text to me? Sarah asked. I don't know, probably his dad. But Carter said those exact words to me. Jessica leaned into the frame. Chloe, do you still have the files? Yes. Chloe pulled her designer handbag onto her lap. The flash drive was sewn into the lining. I'm not as stupid as he thought. The next morning, they gathered in Jessica's boardroom. Chloe wore large sunglasses and a silk scarf, despite the indoor heating. She didn't offer apologies or engage in tearful reconciliations. She simply tossed the silver flash drive onto the mahogany table. 3 years of texts. I kept the important ones in a hidden folder. Why? Jessica asked. Chloe gave a dark, twisted smile. Because you don't blindly trust a man who is actively planning a wedding with someone else. The flash drive was a goldmine. Carter's text to Chloe laid out the entire conspiracy. After we sign the license, she'll soften up. Her mom will help. Another text read, the marriage isn't the goal, the POA is. Without the board seats, this whole thing is useless. And then there were the voice notes. In one, Carter sounded exhausted. Highway road noise humming in the background. If she files for annulment, we drag it out. We request counseling. We demand psych evals. We use the word family until the judge gets sick of it. The process takes months. We can break anyone in months. Chloe sat frozen as her own complicity played out in the audio. Nancy stared at the table. Did you know about the scope of this? Nancy asked her youngest daughter. I knew some of it. The corporate stuff he engineered himself. And you went along with it. Chloe stood up aggressively. Don't start with me. You spent my whole life telling me how easy Sarah had it. I just learned the lesson too well. No, Nancy said firmly. I pitied you, and that was my mistake. But the malice? You chose that all by yourself. The room fell silent. Chloe seemed to brace herself for her mother to back down, to offer her usual blanket of protection. But Nancy didn't move. Jessica logged the flash drive into evidence, submitting it under a voluntary disclosure agreement. The attorney immediately filed an amended petition and notified the judge of witness tampering. At the final hearing, Carter's lawyer attempted one last desperate maneuver, submitting a doctor's note claiming Carter was suffering a severe panic attack. The judge, aware of the police report involving Chloe, denied the continuance. 20 minutes later, Carter walked through the double doors. He looked pale, cornered, and stripped of his usual arrogant veneer. Chloe was called to the stand first. She walked to the witness box as if stepping barefoot on broken glass. Sarah felt no warmth toward her, but the burning hatred had burned itself out. I maintained a sexual relationship with Carter Preston for 3 years, Chloe testified under oath. It continued up until the morning of the wedding. He never intended to end it after marrying Sarah. Carter jumped up. She's lying. She's retaliating. The judge slammed her gavel. Sit down, Mr. Preston. Chloe continued. We had a strategy. He explicitly stated Sarah was gullible, and that our mother could be manipulated into pressuring her. The objective was the power of attorney, leveraging her townhouse, and a lucrative divorce settlement. When the audio leaked, his strategy shifted to playing the heartbroken husband, just to legally stall the annulment. Carter's attorney tried to paint Chloe as a scorned, unstable mistress. Isn't it true you're just a vindictive ex trying to ruin his life? I am vindictive. I am angry. But I didn't deepfake his voice notes, and I didn't type his text messages. Jessica played the new audio files in open court. Carter's own voice echoed off the wood-paneled walls, discussing how to exploit Sarah's polite upbringing and utilizing his father to secure a backdoor real estate appraisal. Robert Preston turned purple. Linda stared at the floor. When Nancy took the stand, she didn't deflect. She recounted the manipulative conversation, the pressure campaign, and her own profound failure to see the truth. When Carter's lawyer asked why she suddenly turned on her favorite daughter, Nancy looked at the judge. Because I finally stopped confusing love with covering up a crime. Sarah closed her eyes. It didn't fix the past, but for the first time, her mother had chosen reality. Carter was the last to testify. He denied everything. He claimed the texts were taken out of context, that Chloe was a pathological liar, that Nancy had been brainwashed by Sarah's wealth, and that his bride was merely punishing him for a moment of masculine weakness. I didn't want her money, he pleaded. I wanted to be her husband. I still object to dissolving this marriage. Jessica stood up. If you didn't want her money, why did you text Chloe that without board seats, the marriage was useless? That was a joke. No one in the courtroom laughed. After hours of grueling testimony, the judge recessed to chambers. Sarah sat in the hallway beside Emily. Martha Davis paced the corridor, muttering that people like the Prestons belonged in federal prison. Chloe stood alone by the far window. Nancy approached her slowly. Do you have somewhere to stay tonight? I'll figure it out. If you want to start over, I will help you. If you lie to me again, my door is locked permanently. Chloe looked at her mother with deep resentment. You chose Sarah. I chose the truth. Late, but I chose it. The bailiff called them back inside. The judge's ruling was delivered in dry, clinical legal terminology, but to Sarah, it was a symphony. The court finds clear and convincing evidence that the respondent, Carter Preston, entered into the marriage contract utilizing egregious fraudulent inducement. The respondent actively concealed a long-term affair with the petitioner's sister, conspired to misappropriate the petitioner's financial assets, and possessed no good faith intent to establish a marital union. His subsequent petitions for reconciliation are deemed frivolous, vexatious, and an abuse of the legal process. Sarah held her breath. Therefore, the petition for annulment is granted. The marriage is declared void ab initio, as if it never existed. All legal rights and privileges previously afforded to the respondent are immediately terminated. Sarah exhaled. For the first time in 2 months, her lungs filled completely. Carter's face went slack, then instantly morphed into pure rage. This isn't over. I'm filing an appeal. Jessica calmly snapped her briefcase shut. That's your right. You didn't win anything. Carter spat at Sarah. I got my name back. Chloe was the first to leave the courtroom. Carter caught up to her at the top of the marble stairs. Happy now? You dragged me down with you. You're the one who told me to save my receipts, Chloe fired back. Now you have nothing. And you're a pariah. I was the only one who put up with you. He raised his hand aggressively, but a court officer immediately stepped forward, resting a hand on his utility belt. Carter lowered his arm and stormed out the glass doors. His parents trailed behind him, his mother weeping about their ruined reputation, his father entirely silent, knowing his son's extortion attempts were now public record. Sarah didn't go out to celebrate. She went straight to the executive floor of Sterling Enterprises. Arthur Vance had assembled the core management team in the boardroom. Without delving into the tabloid details, Sarah informed them that the legal battle was definitively over, the threats were neutralized, and the company was secure. And one more thing, Sarah said, standing at the head of the table. I am no longer going to hide behind the idea that this is just my father's legacy. It's my responsibility now. I'm taking the reins. The executives sat in silence for a moment. Then, Arthur Vance started clapping. Soon, the entire room joined in the applause reserved for someone who took a devastating hit and refused to stay down. A week later, Carter's attorney filed an appeal, but it was a desperate regurgitation of old arguments. He was clinging to the court system because he had no other leverage left. The appellate judge threw it out within days. Shortly after, Chloe packed her car and moved to a different state to live with a distant aunt. Before leaving, she sent Sarah one last text. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. Just know I'm staying out of your life for good." Sarah didn't reply. Sometimes, silence is far more honest than a perfectly crafted sentence. Nancy visited rarely at first. She would call days in advance, tentatively, asking if it was a good time. Sarah spent her evenings reading through the rest of her father's letters. "A person's true strength doesn't reside in their bank account," Richard had written, "but in their internal capacity to defend their boundaries against other people's greed." One afternoon, Nancy arrived with a small shoebox and a sticky note. "This is the absolute last of it. There's nothing else." Sarah took the box of old photographs. "Why did you really hide them?" Her mother sat heavily on a bar stool. "I was jealous of him. Jealous that he could provide you with a life I couldn't. Instead of being happy for you, I punished you by making him absent. And then I smothered Chloe with pity, as if your pain was somehow the price for her happiness. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know. I'm not asking for instant forgiveness." Sarah looked at her mother. The woman sitting across from her was no longer the matriarch demanding submission to keep the peace, but a flawed person who had finally confronted her own complicity. "Come inside," Sarah said softly, but no making excuses for Chloe. Nancy began to cry quietly. "Thank you." 3 months later, on the ground floor of a beautifully renovated historic brownstone in the South End, Sterling Enterprises opened its new flagship coffee roastery. Emily arrived before anyone else, loudly directing the delivery men on where to place the floral arrangements. Martha Davis was aggressively debating the pastry chef about the exact circumference of the lemon tarts. Arthur Vance stood in the corner, chatting with a local bean supplier. Nancy arrived last. She lingered by the glass entrance doors, hesitant to step fully into the bustling room. Sarah walked over to her. "Do you want coffee?" Her mother nodded, a fragile smile forming. "I'd love some." They didn't hug. It was still too soon for that. But Nancy took a seat by the large bay window, and Sarah placed a ceramic mug and a slice of lemon pound cake in front of her. The gesture held no trace of the old guilty daughter. It was just a cautious beginning. That evening, after the launch party ended and the guests dispersed, Sarah stepped out onto the sidewalk. The Boston streets were alive with noise, the neon signs reflecting off the rain-slicked pavement. The air smelled of roasted espresso and freedom. She felt a deep, anchoring exhaustion, the kind that comes from honest work, untainted by fear. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was an unknown number, but the cadence of the text instantly gave him away. "Do you really think a judge's order changes what we had? We could start over. I've realized so much." Sarah read the message without a single tremor in her pulse. She took a screenshot for Jessica, blocked the number, and permanently deleted the thread. Emily walked out of the cafe, locking the door behind her. "Was that him? Again?" "Not anymore." Emily grinned. "Come on. Martha is demanding we take the leftover cake to my place." Sarah laughed, a bright, effortless sound entirely devoid of pain. She looked back at the glowing windows of the roastery. Inside was the legacy her father built, protected not by a legal seal, but by her own iron will. She had walked away from the traitors and reclaimed herself. And those who had come to steal her future were left standing outside a locked door that she was never, ever going to open again.